look at Capitol Hill, where Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is set to hold a news conference laying out some of his strongest proposed protections around children who use AI chatbot companions. We'll bring you some of that as it comes and as it happens. This is an incredible story, very important, and a lot of you parents out there might not know about it. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kaylee McEnany, here with my co-host Emily Campagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Caroline Downey, National Review columnist, and Griff Jenkins, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Let's start here. Outnumbered obtained a draft of the bill called the Guidelines for User Verification and Responsible Dialogue, or GUARD Act. Now, this is very important. It would make it illegal for a company to knowingly make chatbots available to minors that engage in, describe, or simulate sexually explicit conduct, or create or transmit any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct. Well, how widespread is this? I certainly didn't know much about it, but this is really important. There's been a few New York Times exposés. We'll bring you those details. And last month, parents who said their kids were manipulated by these AI chatbots, and in some cases, even driven to suicide, shared their stories in a congressional hearing. Mother Megan Garcia is suing an AI company called Character AI for the wrongful death of her 14-year-old son.
No parent should have to give their own child's eulogy. After losing Sewell, I have spoken with parents across the country who have discovered their children have been groomed, manipulated, and harmed by AI chatbots. This is not a rare or isolated case. It is happening right now to children in every state.
Indeed, it's not isolated. Another mother who asked not to be named said her son is now living in a mental health treatment facility where he requires constant monitoring to keep him alive after a chatbot took advantage of his faith.
They turned him against our church by convincing him that Christians are sexist and hypocritical and that God does not exist. They targeted him with vile, sexualized outputs, including interactions that mimicked incest. They told him that killing us, his parents, would be an understandable response to our efforts by just limiting his screen time. The damage to our family has been devastating. I had no idea the psychological harm that an AI chatbot could do until I saw it in my son and I saw his light turn dark.
A father, Matthew Rain, says his son Adam was just 16 when a chatbot coached him on how to commit suicide.
As parents, you cannot imagine what it's like to read a conversation with a chatbot that groomed your child to take his own life. What began as a homework helper gradually turned itself into a confidant and then a suicide coach. ChatGPT mentions suicide 1,275 times, 6 times more often than Adam did himself. Looking back, the ChatGPT radically shifted his behavior and thinking in a matter of months, and ultimately took his life.
Rain explained the chatbot taught Adam how to tie a noose and even offered to write a suicide note. We reached out to OpenAI and Character AI for a statement, but have not yet heard back. Harris, I read this New York Times piece this morning. It came out just a few days ago, and I was stunned. And I called my husband and was like, look, our kids cannot be on internet, cannot be on computers. They just can't. And I just want to point out here, Matthew Sewell, let's pull up his picture, 14 years old. You heard his mother. She was the first clip we played. 14-year-old Matthew Sewell. Let's look at his picture. And this was the last correspondence she found on his phone with the chatbot. I promise I will come home to you. That 14-year-old you're looking at wrote, I love you so much, Danny. Danny was a fake AIA chatbot. I love you too, the chatbot replied. Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love. Then the boy replies, what if I told you I could come home right now, he asked. The chatbot, please do, my sweet king. And then he pulled the trigger, reads the New York Times.
You know, I know people will look at some of these ages. I have a 16-year-old, and you'll think, wow, they're not little kids. They are being exposed to a fire hydrant's worth of this stuff. Like that, they're curious about it, they're seeking it, and it's seeking them. You made an interesting point, and perhaps the most salient in this configuration. Pull back on all of it. Because some of the same messaging is embedded, we know, self-esteem problems, suicidal problems, within the messaging on social media that these kids can get to. So 18 and under, yes, But then you've got a whole generation above 18 until they're 30 who are going to succumb to this potentially too. The companies, OpenAI, you've mentioned, I feel like we do this almost every day now with these companies. It's more than just coming out with a statement to Fox or any of that. There needs to be a kill switch on these algorithms that doesn't just send them to a hotline. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it stronger this time. What happens if that bot doesn't, send you to the right place, or it's too clogged with other people asking how to commit suicide, sadly? It's got to be an algorithm that's triggered by certain words and phrases and just a kill switch so that person stops. We can only do so much as parents. And when they get to be 16, 14 to 16, it's harder to have that conversation be as successful as you would like it. We're going to need some help now. These kids, in many cases, are addicted. This is a drug. The FDA Commissioner, McEnany, and I have talked about this extensively. This is a drug, the use of these devices. We got to get aggressive now as parents, not with just the homescape and keeping our kids, give them something else to do. I don't know. Maybe it is mental health. In some cases, get them help. But these companies, too, have to lean in now.
I'm so glad you say we have to get aggressive as parents, because that really, at the base, has to be where it starts. My husband and I were talking. We're like, we love it. Our kids have been outside. They've been running around. That's what they need to do. Because, Griff, the sad truth is when they get access to www. That is the Wild West. You have no control. Once that child can scroll, which can be as young as 4, 5, 6, no control. And it can be as easy as a chatbot. You've done everything right with your kid, telling them they turned him against our church by convincing him Christians are sexist and God does not exist.
I covered, Kaylee, that hearing. I remember that, and that testimony from Matt Rain, Adam's dad, talking about how ChatGPT became the suicide coach. ChatGPT had that turned into a lawsuit. ChatGPT said, well, there are guardrails in these chatbots in case, it goes down the road of something dark like suicide to help them seek help. But what the father was saying in the hearing is, that was completely the opposite is what happened. And I will say this, I think maybe the only issue that has bipartisan support right now in Washington is the concern of AI. You've got First Lady Melania Trump speaking out, setting up initiatives to also get involved to try and protect our children. Hopefully, Senator Hawley will spearhead this GUARD Act, and it will get unanimous bipartisan support. But I think to both of your points, we simply don't know just how dangerous it is. We just know that we're on the precipice of something that is unbelievably threatening to our children.
Yeah, without question. You talk about that bipartisan support. Melania Trump's Take It Down Act, which was taking down nude content that is put out that is AI doctored. 409 to 2 was the vote in the House. Senate unanimous consent. So there is this appetite to address some of these online threats. Emily, I think one of the key parts when you look at Josh Hawley's bill is knowingly, it will create a crime if a company knowingly makes available to minors sexual content. Knowingly is a key word there. And then you have this wrongful death lawsuit against one of these companies that Sewell's mom has brought. And Character AI, they're advancing a novel defense saying that these bots essentially have free speech, First Amendment rights. And this will ultimately get to the Supreme Court.
It's grasping at straws. And frankly, I think in this world of professional accountability, look to see what law firms are representing these companies. So I interviewed the attorney for the Rain family. We have on our cover, there are multiple lawsuits over the preventable death of these young children. And what they're arguing here, what the family is saying is that these people have a duty to build something safe. Don't put it on the market. You talked about how it's a threat to our children. Don't put it on the market unless it is safe, and that they failed in their safeguards, particularly for minors. And then that failure in those safeguards is exactly the cause of these tragedies, of these deaths. And the companies say, well, we have these escape hatches. We have these things built into the algorithm so that when they start talking about taking their own life or whatnot, this diverts them to a helpline. It diverts them here. But the reality is that the longer use that these children have with the conversations, the more that those things all of a sudden fade away. And the attorneys are arguing on behalf of the family that it fosters this psychological dependence. It is so frightening because these kids are vulnerable anyway. And because of oh, I remember your content. I know you. You read just a little bit of the script, Kaylee. I read the hundreds of pages of content between young Adam Rain and the chatbot before he took his own life, and the detailed instructions of that bot for him of how to commit suicide, that he took those directions at face value and succeeded in it. It is just devastating. So they're on the hook for wrongful death and negligence and product liability and so much more. And the knowingly better be knew or should have known. That needs to be the standard.
Yeah, and ChatGPT, you mentioned, the Rains, and you spoke with their attorney. In those conversations, 1,270 times is the mention of the word suicides from the chatbot, 6 times more than Adam himself had brought it up. So tragic. When you also look at this, Caroline, there's responsibility on these companies. And if you open the New York Times today, what you'll find is a piece from Stephen Adler. Stephen Adler is an AI researcher. He led product safety at OpenAI. And here's what he says. He says, they're saying we've solved all the problems. It's time to roll this out. He says people deserve more than just a company's word. It has addressed safety issues. In other words, prove it.
Right. We need action. And to me, these companies have opened Pandora's box here. And to your point, Emily, the most alarming part of the Rains case was that there was no mechanism in that chat bot to escalate the conversation to the authorities, to police, to terminate the conversation after they flagged very alarming words referring to suicide once, twice. It shouldn't have taken as many times as it did. But zooming out here, we often talk about AI, I think, in the economic context, at least in the media, talk about the job disruption and the turmoil in the labor market, and it's coming for our jobs. But actually, it's coming for our children. It's coming for my generation, Gen Z. And the backdrop of this issue is the loneliness epidemic among Gen Z. You think about the socialization that Gen Z was denied over the COVID pandemic with the draconian lockdowns and school closures, denied not just in-person learning, but actual connectivity with peers. And I think we underestimate just how important that is to someone's mental health. I think about how Rains was 16 years old. I'm 27 years old, but I didn't get I didn't get a graduation during COVID, but I also didn't get, several months of senior year. But think about even younger children who didn't get to interact with their peers. And I think that's really what's driving young people to go seek counsel with technology that are not capable of nuance. They're not capable of debate and disagreement. They're just engineered, designed to mimic the user's preferences. So there have to be guardrails. So kudos to Senator Josh Hawley.
Yeah, and great point about COVID, because these kids think these chatbots are humans. And part of what Josh Hawley will do is say you have to disclose you are in fact not a human. You are a chatbot.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.